All right, well, let's get started. This is definitely the strangest and potentially most intimate location we've had one of these conversations for those of you who have been coming to all of them. I'm Nate Morehouse, and I've been helping to co-organize this series with Kate Joranson. I learned that one the first time. Gee. Okay. Yeah, exactly. And this is the fourth of a four-part series that was part of the Year of the Humanities in the university. And we are hoping to actually continue this series in the coming year, and we're in the process of working out how that might be funded and where that might go. So stay tuned. We have your contact information, so we'll let you know about that. You'll be on the VIP list. Before we get started to talk about who we have here as part of our conversation tonight, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that this was funded by the Office of the Provost as part of the Year of the Humanities in the university. It was also with matching funding from the Humanities Center, as well as the Department of Biological Sciences, in which you're sitting right now. This is partially my research lab, and many of you may be curious why it's empty. And the reason for that is that we're hiring people to work in this space, to join me in this space. This is meant to be a big collaborative research environment here, which is why it's so open. And it's meant to allow fluid movement of people and ideas through this space. And we're in the part that doesn't have active working lab work going on, but all the way down here on your left, our right up here, the far end there, you'll see some equipment. That's a portion of my research group's lab space. We study jumping spiders and butterflies and how they make reproductive decisions, particularly how they use color to choose who to mate with and what to eat. And for interested people after tonight, I'd be willing to bring people on a brief little lab tour so you can see our animals, which are not here, but I'll walk you around and I can show you where we're doing that stuff. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our group tonight here. I'm really excited to chat with everybody tonight. I'm going to start all the way at the end here. This is Cory Richards-Zawacki. Cori is an associate professor of biology here in biological sciences, and she's the director of the Pymatuning Laboratory of Ecology, which is the field station that the university maintains. She's brand new. She just came in this past fall, and we're all excited to have her here. And she studies amphibian biology in the field and in the lab. Next to her is Delanie Jenkins. Delanie is in studio arts. She's also the director of undergraduate studies. No, you're not. Yes, you are. You're not anymore. You are the department head. Yeah, department chair. And so we're excited to hear about Delanie's work and her thoughts on curiosity. Right next to Delanie is Gretchen Bender, and she is head of undergraduate studies in the history of art and architecture. And last but not least, Carol Greco, right here. She's in the School of Medicine, in the Department of Psychiatry, where she's a psychologist, not a psychiatrist. She's part of the Center for Integrative Medicine, and she studies questions about mind-body problems and how mind-body relationships might help to manage pain or stress or depression, and also placebo effect. More recently has been an interest. So anyway, let's welcome this great group of people. Our topic for tonight is what curiosity looks like in action. So we've been talking about curiosity now. This is our fourth time, and one of the themes that's come up is that curiosity is investigative or active or playful. That somehow it gives a sense of activity associated with it that might not be captured in words like awe or wonder, that might be more passive, although not necessarily inactive, not as investigative, for example. And so we want to explore what curiosity looks like in action for a variety of different people, and so that'll be our topic tonight. But I did want to give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves and their interaction, their relationship with curiosity. So the first question for tonight, just to get us started, is to ask each of you, in any order you choose to answer this in, how have you encountered or how do you interact with curiosity in your professional or personal lives? Go ahead.
I think that was me, right?
Sure,
I
yeah.
volunteered to jump off the deep end and go first. Can you guys hear me good? Okay, close enough? I'm not sure this is working. Yes. that close, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can hear you now.
Okay, so in thinking about this big question, this big theme of action, I just, very simply, what do I do, right? So what is it that I do that is most sort of spurred by curiosity? And I do a lot of things in my life that aren't spurred by curiosity. You know, there's a lot of rote administrative responsibilities that require very little creative energy or very, much intellectual thought. And so there are two big parts of my life that that nurture my sense of wanting to know. And the first is official, and it's part of my, professional responsibilities. And it's the part that those of my colleagues and students in the room who know me, it's probably what you immediately think about, and that's what I call the World Art Project. The World Art Project began in 2001 when I was tasked with the job of teaching Intro to Art. I was then told it had to become Intro to World Art, and I was a very young teacher, and it scared the crap out of me because you're talking about what? 35,000 years of human artistic production across the entire globe. Go. 14 weeks, right? And that's it. That, in a nutshell, is the World Art Project. But it's become this multi-tentacled creature that is an introductory course that's taught to hundreds of Pitt students every year by me and by others in the department. That is their introduction to art, artistic expression, or international culture. It's also, though, now a two-part curriculum. I developed an advanced seminar on world art that's called Contact and Conflict, which actually grapples reflexively and explicitly with the ethical imperative of doing world art and what that even means. The ethical imperative of doing world art and the ethical implications and dangers of doing world art simultaneously. So my research then is about the content, bringing in new material that's going to enable me to satisfy my learning objectives, but it's also researching the pedagogical strategies that are going to be effective. So world art has also become a means to teach other people how to teach, right? And that's both at the undergraduate level and at the graduate level. So I've been working for years with both, teaching them how to teach. And then finally, world art is the mechanism by which we in the department are reaching out beyond the walls of our building, beyond the walls of the university, to engage communities outside of the university. So world art has also become a project that brings me into high school classrooms, that brings high school students onto campus, into museums, working with them about thinking about art as a means to articulate a voice in the community, to encounter. This is it. This is the key word for me, encounter. World art is about coming face to face with the things and the spaces that human beings have taken the time to craft and conceptualize. And encounter it's a word that has two interesting shades of meaning. It could be adversarial. You encounter a problem, you encounter an enemy on the battlefield. But encounter just also literally means face to face, and usually to come to meet something in an unexpected way. And that unexpectedness, that the way in which an art object, an image, a place can wake you up to seeing the world in a way you hadn't anticipated. So that's world art, and that's the World Art Project. And of course, as you can imagine, that is wholly generated by the curiosity to go out. The second part, this is where I'm a little bit nervous tonight, because hardly anybody in the room knows that I do this, but I also make art. And so I brought the book along with me. So this is where I get to be messy and disruptive and disordered and tell a completely alternate narrative with pictures and images and material objects like books that tell stories that aren't, right, that are, the stories I tell in the classroom are messy and complicated, but they ultimately have to make sense. This is, completely letting go and just letting, being not poetical, imaginary, nonsensical, and sometimes angry and sometimes funny and whatever it is the images are telling you want to be. So there's that. So who's next?
So I think I'll start. My name is Delanie Jenkins. I'm an artist. I teach in studio arts. I teach sculpture, art practice. I teach the Honors College Field Study in Wyoming for 4 studio arts majors. This will be our 8th summer out there. Can you guys all hear me? Okay. All right. So in terms of, I want to start with the first question with how do I engage curiosity in my practice, or how did I first engage curiosity? And I think that, when I've been thinking about this question, that formative place is where so much of what I do comes from. And I am a great-granddaughter of sharecroppers from the cotton fields of Texas. And being in the fields as a kid, being in the dirt, being in the river, seeing the snakes in the red water, all of those things, thinking about the plants and the smell of the cantaloupe on a dry day versus the smell of the cantaloupe on a wet day, or the pentagon structure of the interior of the okra flower, mimicking the pentagon structure of the vegetable, or why the pear blossom smells like a pear and the peach blossom doesn't smell like a peach. The curiosity of all those things, and a lot of time wandering and meandering and mulling those questions. So that led me to become a collector of experiences and questions and objects and things that are varied. And I think it's also about that sensory experience. So it's about the smell, it's about the light, it's about color, it's about imagination, but it's also about taste and heat and discomfort and places of comfort. And so a lot of memory is kind of the root of my work that's rooted also in those sensory experiences. And so as I went to school and eventually finished, before I eventually finished, I had a brief career as architectural designer of facilities that were entertainment based. So amusement parks, malls, entertainment facilities, and my job as a designer was to create this relationship of things or events or moments to stop the participant, because the longer they were there, the more money they spent. And that was my job. And in doing that, so whether it's a show and the pumping out the smell of the cinnamon buns and then having you eat that and linger, and now you need something to wash it down, and then you're gonna go shop because you're fired up. Whatever the thing is, it's like these relationships, and there are formulas about this, made me start to question, the experiences and spaces that I engaged in and how I made decisions about money and experience. And then I couldn't do that job anymore. And so when I came to art and finally, kind of got on not the proper track, but the track to where I am now, those were my questions. And in that time working in that architectural design space, I actually fine-tuned some of those sensory experiences from my childhood in an understanding of space and what impacts me sensorially and then how that makes me feel. And then those became things that I could use as tools. So when I went back to school and finally finished, I started making installations, which are rooms and experiences, and it's not rooted in one media necessarily. So I wasn't working from the realm of a media or a skill set or a technique necessarily. I was really always working from ideas and how I wanted to translate or filter an experience for a viewer to kind of pose some of the same questions or things that I was thinking about. And so that navigation of space, then in graduate school being trained more in sculpture, and so that physical experience of the world is really a part of everything that I do. That's not segmented or compartmentalized in mother, daughter, wife, teacher, educator, person, whatever. None of those. It's just it's these fluid intersections. And so some of my practice is studio-based. Some of my practice is responsive. It depends on, sometimes it's project-based, depends on what I'm thinking about. And I guess I struggle with this idea of being in the studio because it's where I want to be. It's the place of action, the place of clarity. But I find that also happens on the yoga mat or in the woods or at the compost pile. So it's like it doesn't have to be, just because I'm not in the studio doesn't mean I'm not having an art thought or not being productive or not connecting all of the network of ideas and inputs that will eventually become the work. So that's my art practice and where it comes from, and that realm of curiosity for that. And then I would say, and I think maybe we'll come back to this later a little bit, in this field study in Wyoming, I've been really trying to kind of understand, going into year 8, like what are the nuggets? I mean, like that's almost seems like a silly word, but like what are the things that the students really respond to? So some of them talk about it as an art boot camp. Some say, if I can make art in Wyoming, I can make art anywhere. And I'll have to give you context, because the university has 6,000 acres in south central Wyoming, 45 minutes northwest of Laramie. We operate out of a town that a lot of people might consider a ghost town. There's 235 people in the town, but most of them you don't see. We see about 5 on a regular basis, because the town consists of all the ranches also. The property is out another 20 minutes on a dirt road in one of these 12-seat university vans, so it's like getting off a boat when we come back to Pittsburgh. There's a couple days of acclimation. But I think, part of the thing about the Wyoming field study out there, so we have an old bank building, we have electricity, no running water, we have a makeshift studio, we live in a lodge from the 1930s. I'm the cook, the students are sous chefs, it's our time for one-on-one. We go to the property, we camp, we also go out to the salt flats of Utah to see 2 important land art works. So we're in the salt flats, we're in the Great Basin Desert, we're in south central Wyoming, and so it's kind of like this extreme contrast to this lush Penn's Woods that we live in, where the canopy, protects us and creates an enclosure and we don't see a horizon. And when we're out there, the sky is like this giant mouth that just wants to devour you. And so there's this physical struggle too. So there's an extreme, there's contrast, but it's also about place and difference and altitude and dry and hot and wind and all of these environmental factors that are really very different. And so navigating this kind of place that's uncomfortable often for the students, and their physical response and their mental response, no matter their preparation and technique and skill and analysis and critique and theory and all of the things that they come with that are the academic tools, now they have this physical reality to navigate just in going to the bathroom when they have to walk 3 blocks, past the barking dogs. So there's a lot that happens out there, and I think time is also time is part of this this condition that is curiosity out there, and also within my work, or maybe curiosity is the condition, and so I think maybe that's something we'll get to as we go. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cory Richards-Zawacki again, and I'm going to give a bit of a different perspective. So I'm a biologist, I'm a scientist, and I have to admit that at first when I was tagged to talk about my interaction with curiosity, I'm like, why me? I don't think about curiosity a lot, but after I sat and thought about it, I do interact with curiosity a lot in what I do, and it's really my curiosity that drives me to be a scientist and drove me to the field that I chose. So a little bit of the history of my route to being a biology professor and an academic. I spent a lot of time as a kid also in the muck and the mud and the streams and the, playing with the snakes and all that sort of thing. And I was also, admiring the intricacies of nature in the same way you were, but my curiosities went to how does it work? Why is it that way? And when I was in high school, I didn't realize that you could use that in a career in science. I guess my high school biology, teaching was more on the cellular and molecular side, and I didn't realize that something like an ecologist existed. And I didn't realize that for the first 3 years of my undergraduate career. I have a degree in chemical engineering. That's what I thought I wanted to do, but I loved the classroom work, I loved the solving of the problems, but I think I was really missing the curiosity, and I was missing the creativity. And it wasn't until I was a junior in college and I took a class, it happened to be in herpetology, which is the study of reptiles and amphibians, which is what I do now, that I realized that you could make a living being curious about the natural world in the way that I had felt that I was curious. And so I pretty much immediately switched courses, and from then on out, it's been a sort of a labor of love in pursuing the topics in biology that I'm most curious about. So my topics that spur curiosity in me have to do with things like how new species evolve. So as we get, little minute changes evolving over generations in organisms, how does that eventually lead to a new species, a new entity on the planet that we can describe and name and do our best to protect? And so that's one of the things that I work on, and the specific arena in which I work on that is with this really awesome poison frog. So I don't know how many of you have seen a poison frog before, but they're usually brightly colored, and their bright colors are a warning that these are toxic, not a good thing to eat. So they're using those bright colors to warn predators to stay away. And so the interesting thing about the species that I study is they exist on an island archipelago off the coast of Panama, but they're all different colors on all the different islands. So if you really boil it down to why do I study these frogs, don't tell this to NSF, but I just want to know why they're all different colors. So, I have to couch it in a different way to get funding to do this kind of work, but I just want to know how that came about, and what is it that's driving these frogs to be all different colors on different islands, even though they're closely related to one another. So that's one half of what I do. The other half of what I do is a little bit more practical, but it's studying how climate impacts the dynamics of a really important wildlife pathogen, which is called the amphibian chytrid fungus. It's a fungus that causes a disease in amphibians that has actually wiped out whole species in parts of the world, and in parts of the world it's really decimated the whole communities of amphibians. And so I'm interested in how climate and climate change are shaping the dynamics of that host and pathogen interaction. And so in that sense, my curiosity has to do with how our impacts as a human society on things that lead to things like climate change are impacting wildlife in ways that we had never even thought of before. And so, I think my curiosity, I was thinking about what is it that makes a good scientist, and I think, at least in my mind, it's curiosity and creativity. So curiosity gives us the drive to ask these questions and to really want the knowledge about how the world works just for knowledge's sake. And then it's creativity that allows us to form the different hypothesis than has been asked before, or take a different approach, use a new technique, adapt an old technique, or really do something that people had stopped doing 20 years ago, but try it again in a new and different way. And I think it's really that combination that I find invigorating and has kept me really excited about my career in biology for such a long time. So, yeah.
Okay. Is this good? All right.
Yeah.
So I'm Carol Greco. I guess first I want to say I would really love to be a sous chef in Wyoming.
Me too.
Yeah, I want to sign up. Also, I'm very curious to see the frogs and the spiders. Yeah, from a distance. The spiders from a distance.
Sure. Safe distance.
Yes, very safe distance. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, I'm Carol Greco. I'm a psychologist in the Department of Psychiatry at Pitt School of Medicine. And I feel like I'm really quite lucky because I get to do research with people. And I also get to do some clinical work with people. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about curiosity that is part of my work with persons, with human beings, and then also a little bit about how it plays into my own personal life. So I guess curiosity about people, as I have studied for a long time, how to help patients that have chronic illnesses, like pretty bad ones, like autoimmune diseases, painful, fatiguing autoimmune diseases, and other people with chronic pain, how to help to empower them to actually reduce their symptoms without drugs. And it really is possible. There are ways that you can kind of a person can train themselves, and they actually have a reduced experience of pain, reduced experience of fatigue, etc. But it's interesting to do that within a clinical protocol because you're supposed to, everything's supposed to be kind of like by a book, but you can't because it's people, and everybody's different. So the curiosity is how can I reach something that's inside of this person and connect with them in a way that they can actually come someplace with it. And I'm just recalling a couple of people that I worked with long ago, 2 different people that had painful lupus symptoms, and one was a physician, and she would do a guided imagery where she would see her blood vessels as like tubing, medical tubing, and she would do relaxation exercises, and that was very helpful for her. And another person with the same disease, she was quite religious and spiritual, and she would visualize herself being held in the arms of God. That was her method for reducing her pain. And so for me, as the person administering a protocol, I just had to be open and curious about what was right for each person. So it's really, some people say it's really messy to work with people, as a scientist, and we could say that, but it's also really fun because there is that curiosity about each person. One of the ways that curiosity has continued to come into my profession is that I became very interested in what exactly is the placebo effect. So you'll see that the drug effect of an antidepressant maybe helps 60% of the people that get the drug have improvement, but 45% of the people that get the placebo have improvement. So what is going on? So I'm curious about that, and I was able to begin to study that. Luckily enough, got some funding, and so we're looking at, from the patient's perspective, what are the factors that actually can start to quantify those things that actually help people to heal in whatever their treatment might be. So that's a different way that I bring a curiosity. And with that one, I just don't know what's going to happen. We've developed these instruments over several years. Now we're testing them out to see how much do they predict treatment outcome. And they're going to predict some, but there's a lot of variability anyway. So that's a little bit about curiosity. I feel so lucky to have the chance to do science and with some wonderful colleagues, which actually to me, the people that I work with is one of the things that helps keeps me curious. Working with people that I care about and that are also curious. There's a nice synergy of energy there. So I wanted to say a little bit about a little bit fun, on a little bit more personal side is I didn't mention, and you didn't mention, but one of the things that's very important to me is I teach meditation classes. I've taught meditation classes here at the university for about 12 years, and I've been a meditator for over 20. And so for me, this is a landscape of curiosity. As I explore my own internal landscape, I learn that for me, curiosity, there is no I when curiosity is here. When there's an I who wants something and doesn't have it, or who is worried about X, Y, or Z, no more curiosity. Okay. So, and as I work with people in the meditation classes, I get the wonderful opportunity to see that flowering also. them becoming curious about their own stuff and the way they work with their own habits and maybe learn how to let some of them go so that they have less stress in their lives. I think that's all I want to say.
Great. Well, I just wanted to remind people there's this is meant to be a conversation, and so there's two ways that you can be involved in the conversation. There's a mic that can circulate, and we'll probably need to pass it around. It's in the back here. So if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand, and we'll try to get the mic to you. If you see the mic coming towards you, you need to grab it and look to see where the hand is so that it can move through. And we also have sheets of paper that you can write it down if you would rather do that. And we'll need to help those move their way to me so I can read those. But while we're doing that, I wanted to segue. I think there's a couple of really nice touch points that I want to use to segue into talking about action. The first is I love how words come up in this that really help to frame my thinking about it. I love that word encounter, because each one of you has spoken about encounters with living things, encounters with the environment, the hot landscape of Wyoming, encounters with people, or with your interior space is also an encounter, looking inwards. And I wonder, at those encounters, the suggestion that curiosity is active suggests that you then do something in that encounter. But before we talk about what you do, I'm curious about, it's hard to not do that. I'm interested in the internal space. So what do you do when you encounter a new situation? I mean, you've all steered very different paths. You're encountering things. You want to encounter the poison dart frogs and the spiders from a distance because there's something internal that causes you to react differently to that than to a situation of a patient with a chronic illness, or maybe not. Maybe you have the same internal experience of an encounter of newness or other or different that you respond to differently. So I want to know what happens when you encounter something new? Is it always a positive thing? Is it sometimes something that you have to force yourself over, a sense of nervousness or concern, or what?
You mean like coming and talking to me?
Sure, yeah. You took a curious action and said, yes, you'd come.
I thought maybe I would start. I was thinking on the way here about how, so I've used Wyoming as a source also for myself and my work. And I went to grad school in Boulder, and the only time I'd ever been through Wyoming was at night, southern Wyoming at night. And so I'd not seen Wyoming. So however many years later I go out to Wyoming, I was like, oh my gosh, this is my heart space. This is, a landscape that I've been dreaming about for a long time. And in this landscape is this form, which is the snow fence of Wyoming. And so Wyoming, especially this place that we are mostly in, is a place that's not in the mountains. Even it's 7,100 feet in terms of altitude in a shortgrass prairie in the middle of two mountain ranges. So there are mountains at the perimeter, and you can see them, and they become our landmarks. But there's very few trees. And when there is a tree, it's usually shade for a house. So no trees and these snow fences, miles and miles and miles, seriously, literally, of snow fences that protect the roadways and protect the railroads so goods and traffic can flow. Even though it doesn't seem like there's really a lot, there is really a lot flowing through the state. And so, interloper me is like, how could they use all this wood? It's unconscionable in this landscape without trees. No wonder there's no trees. And, so it's like we come with our baggage of what we know. And, thinking of an architect, I'm doing all the calculations of oh my gosh, that fence is actually literally a mile long. There's 12 boards. This is the square footage. Here's the board foot. This is how much it cost. And I'm going oh, it's like I can't even look. Don't look. And I'm embarrassed for my country and, all of these crazy things. So, 5 years later, and these are formidable forms in the landscape, and it's the architecture and everything's horizontal. So it's you have a fence, you have a road, you have these, and then you have the snow fence. And you've got the giant sky, but there's no sense of scale because there's no trees and there's no people, and occasionally there's a cow. And these snow fences create their own ecosystems. I learn as I start to watch and notice and not judge, and keep my my what is now Penn's Woods kind of attitude out of that snow fence, and I start to kind of notice the things about the snow fence. And I'm still, it's a remarkable form in terms of the light and the shadow and all of the things. And so over time, and it takes me time, this form kind of plants itself in my kind of, maybe it's a iconography that I start to think about in terms of a maker. And one day I climb over a barbed wire fence and go out there to stand beside one. And I've got my tape measure, and I'm going to measure it. I'm going to do drawings and figure out, how big is this thing? And, I'm standing beside it, and it's 3 times as tall as I am, or more. They're 16 feet tall. And this is one section, so it's like, oh my gosh, and I'm looking at the windmill, and how many studio arts people does it take to encircle the windmill? So, like scale is like a question. So it's like, so I think when we're confronted with something new, we come with what we know and then try to apply it, and often it doesn't work. And I think the thing that's so interesting and fascinating about curiosity is it's this wrestling match, and except for the snow fence doesn't know we're wrestling, but I'm trying to understand and sort out this thing to make sense of it for me, and what are its associations for me. There's all sorts of associations of fence, as boundary, limit, and container, and us and them, and there's social and cultural implications of these things. But how can I use it as a frame of reference to experience or talk about something that's become really important to me formally, but experientially as well? So I think in terms of like something new, I'm not always so judgmental, but it's like you come with what you know and try and figure out how to sort it out, perhaps.